Hello, welcome to Lived Experience with Erin Stoble. I am your host. I am an artist and a songwriter, a musician, and a college graduate. I've also been living with severe mental illness since I was 19. On this podcast, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and also be interviewing guests who too have lived experiences triumphing through adversity. I feel that I, having not become med compliant until I turned 30 in a psychiatric institution, who was hospitalized no less than 20 times against my will, have triumphed through adversity. Today, I am employed and I sing. I write songs. I write poetry. I paint pictures. I am a lot more than my diagnosis. But it wasn't always that way that I felt that. For a long time, I felt shame, and I didn't even recognize that I was different, though I was not in reality. And it was hard living amongst other people who could not understand my point of view. And a lot of times, still in 2023, there are a lot of people that don't understand my point of view, just as I question theirs. But in this day and age, I realize that freedom in America is something that should not be taken for granted. Because when I was in behavioral hospitals, I was not a part of society. Today, I walk amongst able people as a disabled American, and I'm proud of all I have accomplished. During my lifetime, I have sought employment and also not been able to keep employment. I had failures and I had triumphs. But today, I work for a nonprofit that hires disabled Americans and U.S. veterans. It is at this nonprofit that I met my colleague and dear friend, feminist, activist, and author, Susan Graham. Today she is here with me, and I'd like to introduce her. Susan, would you like to say hello?
I do, and thank you very much for that introduction. I'm Susan Graham. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm 36 years old, and I've been a working disabled individual for almost 9 years. I am the youngest of three girls on my dad's side, and I'm also the youngest of my mom's side of two girls. And I was I've been an activist since my days in college, and I'm the member of the class of 2005 Fellows High School Panthers Unite, and I also been working for a nonprofit organization in Spirit Tech since December 2014. This December will be my ninth year. In addition to my work, I'm also a writer, a blog writer, and I'm also an author. I wrote my book entitled Fourth Wave Feminist: A Decade in Battle, and I can show you right here. It's available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online bookstores. You can also buy it from eBay as well. All you have to do is search for Fourth Wave Feminist: A Decade in Battle in the search bar.
Thank you, Susan. I've read this book. I was very impressed by all the accomplishments that you've had in recent years. And I was also impressed by the passion you had for feminism and the Women's March that you participated in 2016.
Actually, it was actually January 2017. It was actually the day after then President Trump was sworn in, and it was actually one of the darkest days that I recall after the election in 2016. It was supposed to be a year of a woman just striving to make things better and triumphing.
Were you disappointed when you saw that your candidate didn't win?
Yes, I was very disappointed, and I was just crushed.
So that brought you to march amongst other women?
Yes, there was tons of generations of feminists and activists united from the second wave to the third wave and to the fourth wave, which I currently associate with.
Can you explain to our audience what you mean by fourth wave?
Well, I'll break it down like this. Fourth wave feminism is the newest installment to the movement, combining the elements of traditional feminist movements from the first wave, the second wave, and with the elements of technology. Fourth wave feminist tackles sexism in the workplace on all sides in various categories. And IT, information technology, is no exception because there's like an eye popping percentage of women working in information technology. And I was stunned to learn a couple of years back that only 6% of women of color work in IT, including me.
Oh, so you're among a small percentage that hold a job in IT.
Yeah, but despite that, I'm like above the when I won the award for achievement from Unix Source back in 2016. I was part of the 1% of highest ranks, and I'm still am after almost 9 years. But there was like a huge eye popping of lack of strong diversity amongst the traditional unions for women of color, because I think there's like still tons of unfinished business, and I always discuss a lot of things of women issues with my mother that I have a lot in common with. And I always said to her that I always believe that housewives should be paid like almost up to like $16 an hour, even if they may not come in fruition. But I'm still willing to advocate on hers and other housewives' behalf because I believe they deserve a fair share.
Do you have any children, Susan?
No, ma'am, I don't. I have a niece and nephew who live in Atlanta, Georgia, with their mother, my big sister.
And how do you like being an aunt?
Homie, it's really great. I see my parents, my dad showed me pictures of my niece and nephew, and they're growing up pretty fast, beyond my imagination, and they're doing really well.
Yes, I too do not have children of my own. I was told by a psychiatrist in my late 20s, early 30s, that the medication that I need to take daily for the rest of my life so that I remain a free woman and not committed to an institution. I was told that the medication caused severe deformities and birth defects. And in fact, a traumatic experience that had happened to me right in the doctor's office was when my psychiatrist pulled up a chair next to me and showed me a textbook of babies born without limbs and told me, Erin, um, the medication I'm prescribing you will possibly have this effect. And I had to consider at that time if I wanted to continue to take the medication or if I would try to get pregnant. And at the time, I decided to take my medication because, as I've said, I turned 30 in the psychiatric ward after 3 months hospitalized. And it was at that time that I just said, the jig is up. I'm going to take my medication. I don't want to live in the hospital. I guess I'm not going to have children. And it's only now, 15 years later, that I'm beginning to mourn that loss.
I believe there's a different story with my experience because I remember being a kid 19 years old in college. I already started taking birth control, and it was my choice.
And you are a pro-choice feminist, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am. I am.
And these are convictions that you hold dearly to yourself.
Well, absolutely. I've been absent since I entered high school, and I just wasn't. I knew for sure I wasn't ready to commit to a relationship, as far as I was concerned. But when I started taking birth control, I knew it was the best decision I ever made in my life. I look back with no regrets or anything. And as far as I know, being 19 years old, who's still trying to navigate the world outside of high school life, and it's just transitioning from teenager to adulthood. I mean, young adulthood. Believe it or not, I got into to the feminist movement sideways than I anticipated.
You say sideways?
Yes, sideways. I started to have these radical theories, and I never saw myself as some kind of a turf, more like a crazy trans exclusion radical feminist. That's not who I am. I'm more associated with the trans inclusion radical feminists across the globe, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, I too studied women's studies in college in the late 90s. I believe I was reading second wave feminism. It was called Women's Studies at the University of Vermont, and after I graduated in 2001, they did change the name of the department to Gender Studies.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Yes, and I also am of the belief, being an LGBTQIA person myself, I do believe the university went in the right direction by changing the name of the department.
I think it was the right thing to do as well. I'm a strong super ally to the LGBTQ plus community because I have friends and I also have work colleagues that I work with are also part of that LGBTQ plus family, and I know I have relatives associated with that too. Despite this kind of in conservatives within family members, which I rather not discuss. I always believe that I must fight for everything that is equal, and I must take a stand against those who oppose transgender individuals associated themselves in sports categories. Because I think the transgender ban on sports competitions is absurd, it's sick, and I truly believe that all should be welcome, no matter what.
Thank you for telling me that, Susan, and sharing that with us. Certainly, there is controversy. What I'd like to ask you is have you ever in your lifetime felt or been a part of people opposing you? I know that for me, the personal is political. So I like to talk about the fact that my diagnosis is schizoaffective disorder. And I like to talk about this because there's a lot of stigma against the severely mentally ill, or mental health consumers is a nicer way to put it. Have you ever felt any opposition?
I felt various oppositions being diagnosed with major depressive disorder, or is known as major depression, which I have since 2008. And I was also diagnosed with a mild form of schizophrenia, and I have mild to major anxiety since 2008. And I felt a lot of stigmatism from all sides, not just being an individual with mental health, but also as a woman of color. It's like a ton of bricks stacked right in your face. And when I was searching for to get work, to get a career started, there were like a huge odds stacks against me, and to a point there, I felt like I couldn't even go through with it to keep searching for a job or things like that. I know for a fact that I might be on the autism spectrum. That's something I know for sure. And I had ADHD since I was 7 years old. That was back in 1994. Also, in addition, there was like a huge ton of bricks of stigmatism right in my face. And I just had to dig deep into myself and say, you're not gonna put me down today. I'm gonna go in the job club and I'm gonna keep applying no matter what it takes. And by the time I graduated from the Sierra Group Academy, it was October 2014. I went for the interview for Inspiritech. I think a week before Thanksgiving, if I can remember that. And when I got the call, they said I have a position for me, and I accepted it. And almost 9 years later, I'm still there.
9 years.
Almost 9 years.
Boy, you have that over me. I've been working for a long time. I remember my first job was Domino's pizza delivery. I was answering the phones when I was 13. But
I did not enter, and then I did not get an entry job until I was 27 years old.
Well, see, there is the differences that we have amongst ourselves, the two of us. We share similar things with our mental health diagnosis, but we have different lived experience. Those of you watching the video can see that I am Caucasian and Susan is a person of color. And we are friends, but I do not have her experience. My experience was one living in the suburbs. I didn't grow up in Philadelphia. I lived in the suburbs of New York City in central New Jersey. And I came from a family that may even uh, be seen as ableist in the core beliefs that I learned as a child. But that soon was shattered in their world when their seemingly uh, particularly fine daughter went to the university and came back, and the parents thought something was wrong. I was diagnosed at 19 with a severe mental illness, and
I was 21 when I was diagnosed
yes,
formally.
I once heard in the psychiatric community that schizophrenia often for women comes out around 18 to 23, and for men, it might come a little later. Um,
Damn.
yes. Susan, were you ever in a psychiatric hospital?
I was hospitalized in a psychiatric ward hospital not once but twice. The first time was November 2011 after the Thanksgiving holiday, and the most recent one was 2000 was May in 2017 when I once again had volunteered myself to be hospitalized. And
Susan, are you like me? Do you like to keep track of how many years it's been since you've been committed to a psych ward? Do you get proud of the years of freedom that you've had?
yeah, I get proud with couple of freedoms I got. I mean, even though I live with my parents, I live a very different life. Aside outside the house, just being the working girl that I was meant to be, and just trying to do the best I can do despite my high anxiety issues. I
Well,
just
you're doing great today.
thank you.
Yes, you're very well spoken. Um, I know for myself, the last hospitalization brought me to Philadelphia. I had gone voluntarily, and I was still in the suburbs, but the only psychiatric hospital that had a bed was Belmont in Philadelphia. So they sent me there because I was suicidal. And I decided in the hospital that I was going to start my life over. I was excited about the possibility of being in a major metropolis. So instead of going back to my apartment, I went to a halfway house in Philadelphia. And luckily for me, one of the major supports in my life, albeit you will find out in this podcast, it has double-edged sword, but one of the major supports in my life has been my family. uh, they do at my age make sure that I have a roof over my head, so I
The same thing for my family as well.
yes, we
Because there were
could.
times I felt suicidal myself when I was hospitalized like for the second time in 2017 in May. My medicine that I've been taking for a long time was beginning to work less for me, and a lot of doubts have rang in my mind of old insecurities just come back to creep up in my spine, and I spent a week at the hospital, far from my parents and my sister. Of course, I was scared, absolutely, and not just that. I remember praying to God and asking Him, please forgive me for feeling the way I feel, and
Now,
I'm
Susan, I hate to interrupt you. As your friend, I often uh, ask you to use positive self-talk.
yeah,
Now, I heard you say, please forgive me. This is such an interesting thing. I know at my darkest days, when I've been suicidal, I have felt um, guilt. I felt
shame,
shame just for being me.
exactly.
And I think that has to do with the stigma that we're here today to dispel.
Yeah, it's like a severe form of stigmatism that hits you in the gut, and I know
Well,
what that's like.
well, yes, I'm a little bit older than you, but I wonder, for me, growing up in the suburbs, I watched television in the 80s and 90s, and I particularly like sitcoms and comedy. And one thing that I found comedians often do is poke fun of marginalized people. God bless
Thank
you.
you.
Poke fun of marginalized people.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot before.
And unfortunately, me as a child often watched television to keep me out of my parents' way or to divert my attention away from the homework I was supposed to be doing. But I would watch television and I sort of believed everything I saw. And I never thought, hey, I'm crazy. I didn't know what that means. What does crazy mean? I mean, it's just not a very nice word, is it, Susan?
Oh hell no, it isn't. I get it all the time from those who never saw me before. When I feel awkward, whenever I ride a bus, when I feel pretty much over the edge in my inside of me, that's when things get really crazy. I just try to tell myself, calm down, calm down. And there are times I talk to myself, which could be pretty embarrassing, but not in public, but in my own room.
Well, you know what, Susan? That's also interesting. Uh, I have talked to myself before. There were times before the medication I take that I heard voices.
So did
Now,
I.
yes, and I also believed that people could read my mind without me speaking. So oftentimes when I'd get sick, I would actually stop talking to people because I thought they could read my mind.
And and sometimes be judgmental.
Well, see, that's the other thing. So now I am medicated, and people can still judge. I know.
Yeah, behind our backs or in our faces and things like that.
Yes, and I think it's important, at least in my own wellness and recovery, to have a strong sense of self. I have a strong sense of self. I know that I'm a valuable employee at our company in Spirit Tech, which employs us.
Absolutely.
Yes, I know that I even have fans that will listen to my music and enjoy my music, and I enjoy music. Actually, I listen to music to self soothe. I realize this. I've been listening to music since a child and also singing since a child. I know that you also like music. What are
Yes.
some of the bands or songwriters, singers that you listen to?
Damn, that's it's just so many to list. But I gotta keep it. I'll keep it more simple and short. I listen to Sarah McLachlan. I also listen to Motown hits from my parents' days as they were young. They were young kids. Also, a little dose of a rock and roll doo wop era when where my daddy grew up in, because both my mom and dad are from the South. They're from South Carolina, and that's why everyone can hear and watch that I got some kind of ridiculous country draw in my Philly accent. But the fact is, I'm street smart. But I listen to most of the songs of the '90s, and I like to listen to Jewel and Smashing Pumpkins, one of the best all right alternative rock bands of all. Because I mean, I was a grunge kid growing up.
You're a grunge kid.
Yeah, absolutely grunge kid growing up.
So did you wear
I did wear plaids.
you wear plaids?
Yes, I did. I recall wearing plaids. Yes, I do, and I did wear overalls. But I the plaid shirts I wore are not cutouts. It's just like long sleeve, and I just kept them buttoned. But at least I wear. At least I was able to wear some nice jeans during that time.
When you were growing up, did you wear clothes that your friends wore? Did anybody give you a hard time for the way you looked or appeared?
I don't think so, because I mean, when I started going to school in 1993, if I can remember correctly, I guess I was the best dressed at that time.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, Susan, that's pretty cool.
that's from my parents' point of view. I just go there to learn. Even though there are times, even the times, but when I start to grow up, I try to be cool, try to fit in with the cool crowd, and I always get into trouble.
well, I tried to fit in with a cool crowd growing up too. And one thing I realized was that trying to live up to what I thought people's ideals were was a lot of pressure. And that was
Yeah.
part of the reason that I broke, so to speak. I had a psychotic break after my first year in college. And I remember I was very mad at my parents for bringing me to the hospital. And I've been in some crazy, well, that word again, whoops, but I've been in some intense hospital settings. And I remember the first hospital I was in, I actually had solitary confinement in a padded room. And I went back to college the next year, and I remember hating my reflection in the mirror. And I went to the barber and told the barber to shave all my hair off. And then I bought my own set of clippers. And for my entire sophomore year in college, I guess it was 1998, I yes, I shaved my head. It was only years later that I met somebody who said For a woman to shave her head is like suicide. Did you ever hear that, Susan? What do you think of that?
I was 11 years old in 1998, so I wasn't aware of what was going on. I
Yes,
was
I didn't think it was like suicide. I
no,
remember
I
watching G.I. Jane and seeing Demi Moore with a buzzed head,
yeah.
and I felt very empowered shaving
That
my
is that.
head.
I look at the of when women when they shave their heads off. That is symbolic. It means like when you shave your head or something, you feel like the weight has been lifted from you, from the struggles that you had to endure for your time.
Yes, I remember this was the beginning of me telling the world, don't look at me as a beauty. Don't look at me as a sex object. I am an equal person in every way, meaning there should be no commodity among people.
And no compromise either.
And no compromise, yes. That's something I remember. Even my nose piercing that I have today. I remember at the time that I got my nose pierced, I was certainly glad that I was unemployed because I thought nobody would employ me with a nose piercing. Luckily, our company doesn't mind that I have a nose piercing.
I actually got a second hole in my ears in 2011, and I was already like 20, almost 23 years old, if I recall very well. And when I got the second holes in my ears, I felt like, yeah, this is what I wanted when I was 16 years old.
Yes, and
And
I think
I
as
got it.
women, we can be powerful women
Yeah,
and still adorn ourselves with jewelry.
absolutely. I mean, just don't look at me like some kind of pretty face or some kind of sex fiend object toy that you want to see.
Now you
You look at me
said
as a unique woman who is just as equal as you.
yes, and you said not a pretty face. I remember I turned you on to Ani DeFranco
Yeah,
recently. Did you hear that song, Not a Pretty Face?
absolutely. I actually listened to it not once but up to 10 times already.
Yes, she certainly influenced me back in college. I remember my glory days were back in college, driving around to living in Clip. And, you know, Susan, let me ask you.
Hmm.
When I was, I'll preface it by saying this. When I was in college, I refused medication. Was there ever a time that you did not want to take medication for your mental illness?
There have been times, yes, I admit that, but but my mother and my case manager both of them told me that your brain needs food, and that's what your antidepressants are meant to do, to to feed your brain with something that's to ease the tensions, that the pressures that you're enduring. And it turns out that both of them were right. And my father, he said the same thing, but in a different way. But it sounded the same way, and it makes total sense that even if I don't want to take medication for the rest of my life, I had I had made a promise to remind myself to do it and check it on the phone and make sure I logged it in that I took it.
Yes, for me, I had to accept some of the side effects that my medication gives me. Another diagnosis that I now have is tardive dyskinesia. It gives me some facial and body movement tics.
I have a mild form of TD myself. When I was when I took the test at Einstein,
Yes,
but mine is not as bad.
and
There are
it,
times I slip. There are times I things that drop on the floor, and there are things I do make some kind of wild, some kind of facial expressions, but it's not that serious
Yes,
because I've been medicated for a long time.
well, you see, and that's another thing. So mental illness for me has been a silent disability, right?
I think
You
so.
you can't see it; it's silent.
Yeah,
Uh,
like a visible shield that just shadows over your entire body.
and then when I started having the tics and the facial movement, all of a sudden it becomes a physical disability.
Yeah, and
And
that's the craziest part of it all.
well, I think it goes back again to judgment. You know,
Judgment and ignorance.
well, I think a lot of the judgment comes from ignorance.
Yeah.
But let's tell the people how they could educate themselves.
Well, the only answer to that one is to do your own research. You go online and just search for judgment towards mental health individuals or patients, or judgment towards the people of color with mental health issues.
Yes, I will say, let's talk about that. So, I disclosed that I've been hospitalized against my will. So, what that meant was usually an ambulance and a police officer would come and take me in an ambulance to an emergency room, and from the emergency room, I'd be transferred to a behavioral health hospital, and then I would not be allowed to be released until 30 days or when my insurance stopped paying for it. Now, being taken away against my will, it's a lot. It's a lot. It really is a lot because I grew up as a child going to Sunday school, learning mores, developing morals, and I was told stories. And the people in the psychiatric institution were supposed to be scary. I know a lot of people in New Jersey, at least, would be visiting abandoned psychiatric hospitals to get a little spook out of themselves around Halloween. And quite honestly, my experience was the help or the treatment was worse than anything the patient might have been doing. I'm a heavy cigarette smoker, Susan. You know this. You get on my case about this.
I don't mean to.
But you care. You care.
Yeah.
Well,
I do.
in psychiatric hospitals now, luckily, I do count how long I've been since my last hospitalization, and I believe it's about 8 years, 8 to 10 years now. Now, I heard that in Philadelphia, cigarette smoking is no longer allowed. From the time that I had my last hospitalization and all the previous hospitalizations, I was allowed to smoke cigarettes, but maybe only 3 times a day. And I remember going through nicotine withdrawal in the hospital and being told that I'm not allowed to go out for a cigarette. Well, you know, that infuriated me, Susan.
I had no idea.
And I know in the hospital, that would be when my anger would come out.
Mm.
So I have been tackled, put in 3-point restraint, put in solitary confinement in the hospital.
Damn.
Now, sometimes it would be because they deemed me uh, unsafe because I wanted a cigarette. Sometimes, in my memory, I wasn't able to communicate to people because I thought they were reading my mind. But looking at me, the nurse would assess that I needed to be in solitary confinement. That caused PTSD for me. So I know for myself, I had to seek out treatment and advocate for myself on the outside to find psychiatrists and therapists who would meet me where I was at and make me feel safe. And I do have to thank those therapists, those psychiatrists. They helped me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Susan, I want to talk a little bit more about your book. May I see your book?
Sure.
It's Fourth Wave Feminist, A Decade in Battle.
Correct.
And you have some photographs in your book.
I do. Yes.
These are of the Women's March. I see
The first
it.
Women's March of Philadelphia, which was a sister march to the National March in D.C. back in 2017 in January 21st, the day after then President Trump was sworn in. It was the darkest day. I did not watch the inaugural, to be honest. I watched something else, and just in protest, and I just felt that I just couldn't ignore what was going on. But responding to the march that rejuvenated my activism in the movement, it was something that I felt I needed for myself. And I made a promise to my parents that I will keep fighting for what I believe is right and keep fighting for all things equal.
Susan, are there other women's marches? Have they had them every year?
Yes, they had the one in 2018, which was the biggest march of that time, and they had the another and the march again in 2019, and there was also the one in 2020, 3 years ago. That was the recent march I went to date. That was like pre-pandemic timing before that happened, and I was very fortunate to go to that one, and
You know, Susan, I want to read the back of your book.
please.
It says Susan Graham hails from Philadelphia, PA, and writes a deep and empowering story. Susan describes herself as being at a crossroads in life prior to Inspiritech and says that this job has given her a sense of direction and independence. She states that the best part of having a job at Inspiritech is that it has made her a better person. She was originally a Tier 1 help desk agent and now is an IT surveyor at the same company. She says her job is the best thing that ever happened to her because it gives her a chance to contribute to the workforce in a way that she hasn't done before. This job gives her a greater sense of purpose and self-confidence than she's ever had, and she enjoys feeling like a part of a team at Inspiritech. She says this job provides a second family. Susan's advice to others with disabilities is Don't second guess yourself about your disabilities and what you can do. Never give up. If I can do it, you can too. Susan, we're coming up on the hour. We have about 10 more minutes. Let me ask you, is there a message you could give a young woman who may be just getting diagnosed with severe mental illness that may give her hope?
There's something I can say about that because of due to my experience, and the best advice I could give to the sisters is who are struggling in adapting to their new situations with newly diagnosed mental health disorders. Never lose hope. You may have your growing pain days, and you also may have to deal with ignorance and at times those around you who may not be as supportive as they should be. My only advice to them is that you're not alone. You got this. You've
You've
you come
got
a way,
this.
you come a long way, and you strive to be more independent minded, and always look out for your other sisters who also be struggling as well. Be that woman. Set an example of determination, and be that leader that you were meant to be. Also, make your parents proud, and assure them that you're going to be okay, and assure yourself that you're going to be okay. Never second guess yourself. And if I can overcome everything that I went through, you will do the same thing.
You know, Susan, I hear from your message a strong belief in oneself. Okay, I had a strong belief in myself as well, and I had everything I could have wanted in life, and then I was being told by psychiatrists that I was sick and would never be like my mother, and I would never hold a job, and I'm 45 now, and I've overcome quite a lot, and I've changed a lot. But I believed in this person that I present as today. I believed in her. I knew that even when my doctor had to lose his paperwork to the insurance company so that I wouldn't be transferred to the state institution for a year to be forgotten about. I believed then when I was released, because I was just well enough to be released before the insurance had given up on me. But I believed in myself. I knew that one day it would be okay, even though I'm a suicide survivor. Yes. I would say to any young person newly diagnosed with mental illness, I would echo Susan by saying you are not alone.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
We talked about small percentages when you mentioned that only 6% of the workforce in IT are people of color or women.
It's actually both. It's actually both of that.
Yes.
Exactly.
So these are small percentages. I remember hearing there was a small percentage of the population who have schizophrenia. But the thing is that with social media today, the world is not so small.
I agree with that one. I think the world is just as big of its ego. But also, in addition, I always felt that this world could be a scary place to live in because we can't. The only thing that we could change is make this world better, but we can't do that unless we change ourselves first.
Oh, that's brilliant, Susan. Really, I do a lot of work on myself, and just even making that decision to move to Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection.
That's right.
You know, Susan, that opened my eyes from that little girl growing up in the suburbs of New Jersey. Certainly opened my eyes. Um, and um, I just feel that as a white cis woman, I also may be marginalized just by being disabled. So that's a commonality that I feel in that there is prejudice, there is ableism.
Absolutely. There's tons of that. It's like a form binds together in a form of fascism.
Well, that's a topic for another day. I would like to thank Susan for being here.
Thank you. Thank
And
you very
I
much.
hope you enjoyed our first episode of Lived Experience with Erin Stoble. I hope to continue. Susan, would you be a guest another time on this podcast?
Yes, I'll be honored. I'll be
Okay,
honored.
thank you. Thank you. Um, until the next time, my name is Erin Stoble, and I just want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content.